Welcome back to Majesty Mike, everybody. Today we have Matthew Stapley joining us on the pod. Matthew, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And for those of you who don't know, Matthew Stapley is a very sought after psychic medium from Canada. So we are really excited. And Chris and I have actually had a reading done by him together.
Oh yeah. Do you remember, Matt?
I do actually remember. It was a long time ago, though, so I don't remember any details, but I do remember reading for you, yes.
A very long time ago. So I guess the first question I want to ask you is for those who don't know, can you kind of explain what a psychic medium is?
Sure. So a psychic medium is basically somebody that has the ability to connect with the spirit world or receive messages and information from the ethers, for lack of lack of a better word. I really believe that everybody on the planet has this capability. By the way, some of us are born with it switched on, some of us develop it over time. But I think it's one of those things where we're all, inherently connected. We're all having an energetic conversation with the universe around us, and psychic mediums are people who've been able to become aware of it and do it on purpose.
Yeah. So, how did you first kind of recognize this ability in yourself?
Well, it was a little bit weird. So my dad had traveled to Thailand, and was in Carleton Place, where I grew up, not far from Ottawa. And he had called to say hi to me and my brother and my mom. And I got on the phone with him and I said, "Dad, what are those big teeth sitting beside you on the table?" And he was like, "Well, they're elephant tusks. And how did you know they were there?" And so I just started describing the room he was sitting in, and it really, really freaked him out because that was just so far from uh, anything that he had ever been exposed to before. And then it just kind of kept happening over and over and over again, and eventually started getting messages and seeing people that had passed on and things like that. I guess it just kind of took on a life of its own eventually, and I just kept doing it.
That is spooky.
That's kind of really cool though. That's interesting. I guess who was, I mean, if we could rewind a bit,
Sure.
who was Matthew Stapley as a kid? Like, did you always have these like weird senses? Because I always hear stories about kids who have like these weird senses or like I don't know what to call them. Just like when you see things or
Visions.
vision, stuff like that. Can you tell us about that? If you remember anything or
Sure, yeah, I do. So, well, I mean, if I'm trying to, I'm painting a picture of me as a little kid. I was a little bit weird in general. So I had like, learning disabilities. I have autism. There was already a bunch of stuff kind of going on, and so I think when these things started to pop up at first, they were like, "Oh, look, another dimension of his weirdness," but it'll wear off eventually, and of course, it didn't. But yeah, I was somebody that really was sensitive to their environment. So I was always feeling things and seeing things that other people couldn't see. And it wasn't really until I started sort of telling people what I was seeing that everyone was like, "Oh, okay, this is like not what we thought it was." But I remember, like, even at 6, 7 years old, lying in bed at night being terrified because I could see all of these people like standing around my bed trying to
oh my
talk to
God.
me, and I knew that they were non-physical, like I could see
Mhm.
through them. So, but as a little kid, when you don't know what's happening, it's a little bit creepy. And so it wasn't until I started expressing, what I was seeing, especially with that experience with my dad in Thailand, but also when my passed on grandfather came to visit me. And so that happened around 11 years old or so. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and I remember feeling his presence and seeing him standing beside the bed, even though he had passed away like years before. And I remember being so scared, and I ran into my parents' room, and I woke up my mom and I said, "Mom, Grandpa's in my room. Like, tell him to leave me alone." And of course, she was like half asleep and was like, "Yeah, no problem, Matthew. I told him go go back to bed." So I went back into my room, and I remember starting to fall asleep again, and he showed up again. And so he started telling me messages to tell to my mom and my grandmother and family members. And I remember the next day we went to visit my grandmother in Ottawa, and we were all just sort of, I was sitting in the kitchen, and um they were all sort of huddled in the corner whispering, obviously, about what had happened. And then my mom came over and said, "Oh, I understand you I'm telling you had a visitor last night. Did he tell you anything? And I said, well, yeah. So I started telling them all of the different things he had said. And there was a lot of things that I could not have known about, like family estrangements and, really things that a kid wouldn't know. And there was one part of it that was a prediction that my estranged uncle would return to the family in 10 years. And it was pretty much 10 years later that my uncle, out of nowhere, just showed up on my mom and dad's driveway wanting to talk to my mom. So it was like a very, very intense experience. And that just started happening more and more and more. So at first they were kind of spaced out experiences, and then they just became pretty much every day.
Wow. And when was it that you kind of turned this into your career where you're like, this is what I'm going to do?
Hmm.
It was an accident. It wasn't what I had planned to do, like, at all. So my thought was that I was going to finish high school, go to college, become a nurse, or work in healthcare or whatever. And so I was about 18 years old, I guess. And I remember being in this French class that was for um, people who just wanted to learn conversational French. It wasn't a part of school. It was kind of like outside of school, and it was all adults and working for the government or whatever. And our tutor was tutoring us all individually, and then brought us together for um, a kind of round table practice session. And I remember we had to talk about strengths or Leonard goth, gothed out kid. And I remember just sitting there and saying, oh, well, I can make good chicken. I work at KFC. And then the teacher said, no, tell them about your other skills. And at this point, I was able to see aura colors around people. And so I had told them that. And one person in the class said, oh, do it to me. Tell me what you see. And so I started telling her things that were happening in her life that she didn't tell anybody. Like, they were really on the down low secrets. And then after that, she cried and I hugged her, and then she left. And I said, well, I feel like such a jerk. I made that nice lady cry. But the woman whose house we were at was like, that was awesome. We're having a family reunion. Come and we'll pay you whatever you want. And we just want you to do this for everybody. And I said, okay, cool. So I did it. And then it was within a few weeks of that, my parents' phones started ringing off the hook, and people from all over Eastern Ontario were calling to find out how they could get a session. And they were driving to Carleton Place to get readings from the gothed out 18-year-old weirdo. And then it just kind of kept going. Yeah.
That is really, really, really cool. When we came to see you, I remember you drawing on paper. Do you still do
Yeah.
that? And if so, can you explain why you do that?
Sure, yeah. So it's probably not as metaphysical as one would think. Honestly, I just have terrible social anxiety, and it just kind of gets me in the zone if I'm not
Oh,
looking at the person that I'm reading for. But there is an element of doing automatic writing as well. So it's a little bit of both, to be honest. Mostly when mediums do things like that, it's just to help them focus so they kind of get out of their own way a little bit.
That makes sense. And so I know you kind of explained what a psychic medium is, but are there people who just kind of identify as a medium? And if I'm not mistaken, mediums kind of connect with the spiritual world. And then people who just identify as psychics, which psychics are supposed to tell you the future. Is that kind of correct?
Kind of, yeah. So the way to sort of describe it is, so everybody has psychic ability. Everybody has the ability to perceive things at an extrasensory level. Somebody who identifies just as a psychic might see the future. They might also just be able to perceive where somebody's at. They might be able to get insight in someone's body, let's say like a medical intuitive. Somebody who's a medium has the ability to connect with the other side, and that can show up in a few different ways. So in one way, it's spirit communication, like what I do. In other ways, it could be healing work, bringing energy from another realm into the physical plane to benefit somebody. But generally speaking, those are the two things. So not everybody who practices psychic work practices mediumship, but all mediums have psychic ability because of the way that it works.
I wanted to ask, I'm sure that there are a lot of scam artists out there who kind of claim to be psychic and stuff like that. Can you spot that right away? Someone who is, kind of taking advantage of people and just kind of telling them what they want to hear or whatever the case, just for financial gain.
People that do that, they're generally easy to spot. So the big scam that you often see will be people who say, "Oh, come for a reading," and they'll tell you like a few things that may be specific. Usually they're just generalizations. And then they'll say something like, "Oh, you have a curse on you. So, pay me this money and I'll remove it," or something like that. That's one type of scam. That's like the oldest scam in the book for sure. There are other people that might like look at people's information or something like that to try, and that goes way back. So back in like the mid 1800s, there was a thing called the American Lyceum movement, which is spiritual mediums and psychics sort of traveling around the world, actually, but it started in the US. And they were traveling around, and they were presenting and doing seances and readings and all of these things. And there was the authentic mediums, and then there were these other people, and these other people would go into town like a week in advance, and they'd research everybody, and they would go to the cemeteries and get names and terrible things like that. And so that's like another kind of scam. I want to say that at least here in Canada, both of those are incredibly rare. So they stick out like a sore thumb. But I think anytime somebody says you've got this bad thing happening and I can remove it for a fee, or somebody, is very obviously using information that is available, in social media or whatever, I think both of those things are not good. But I think most people can spot them. And one way that you can make sure that that's not the case, obviously, would be to sign up with your session with a fake name. First of all, would be one way to do that. Another way would be to make sure that they have credibility. So are they somebody that has done a lot of work publicly? Do they have good ratings online? Have they, have you been referred to them? And these are different ways that people can kind of escape from the clutches of the scam.
Was there anybody that you ever looked up to after discovering your abilities? Like Tyler Henry, or I mean, he's kind of young, I know, but there are other psychic mediums, famous ones, especially the ones on TV. Did you ever look up to anyone?
I did, yeah. So the first two that I had ever heard of when I was a teenager would have been James Von Prague and Sylvia Brown. So both of them, I thought they were like the coolest thing ever. But this was like the early 2000s, and really there wasn't a lot of well-known people. I had already been doing this forever before, Teresa Caputo showed up, or Tyler Henry, or any of these other really amazing mediums. There wasn't like a whole lot, to be honest. And I remember watching, I think it was an episode of Unsolved Mysteries as a kid, and James Von Prague was on there talking about a crime or something. Sure, it was Unsolved Mysteries. And I remember being so captivated and feeling so not alone. I actually had the opportunity to talk to him many years later. It was in my mid to late 20s. I was able to, I had a video chat with him, and I was able to actually thank him for being such a light in my teenage years. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So are there different types of conventions or like meetups for psychic mediums globally or in Canada, or like what is that like?
That's a good question. I think obviously there's like psychic fairs where people can
Yes.
go and get readings or whatever. I don't think, to my knowledge, we don't have like sort of like secret like back alley, have to travel by a fireplace to get there kind of meetings. No. Um, no, but I think people, like in any profession, will gravitate towards other people, right? And so I am blessed to be surrounded by a lot of other amazing colleagues as friends, and we connect, regularly and things like that. But I don't know that there's like a society. I'm sure there is somewhere, but I haven't been invited. There are spiritualist churches, so that's kind of going in a slightly more religious direction. But if you go over to the UK and some areas in the US, they have church services where there will be hands-on healing and mediumship as a part of the service. And so those communities are very vibrant. And if you go to like Lilydale, New York, that's an entire town where you have to be a medium to live there. So there are definitely places and things, but I wouldn't say that most of us are plugged into anything like that.
I imagine this line of work can be very draining, emotionally draining. What do you do to kind of recharge, especially after a heavy session?
The answer is probably not what you're expecting. I like to watch reruns of Hoarders while I should be cleaning my house, probably.
I
Um,
literally do that too.
I know, right?
It
So,
actually motivates me.
yeah, like totally. Yeah, honestly, I think I probably just do what everyone else does. I like hang out with my animals, I watch TV, and just basically like do anything I can to kind of return to the moment. Because when you are in the space of reading, especially with mediums, we kind of lose touch with a sense of the moment, right? We're either like looking at the past, or we're looking at the future, or we're talking to some other dimension, and so the sort of reclaiming our energy or revitalizing ourselves is really about just kind of becoming more grounded and just stepping more into the present. And so yeah, pretty much the way anyone else chills out after work.
Gotcha. And without, kind of disclosing too much, could you tell us maybe about one of your heavier sessions or the most difficult reading that you've ever come across in your career?
That is a tough question. Let's see. Um, well, I can tell you about two that I have permission to talk about.
Mhm.
One of them was a woman who came to me because she was looking for her birth father. She was adopted, and all she had to go on was England, and that was about, and her birth year and stuff like that. But that was about it. And I remember her coming in and her telling me what she was there for, and I was like, oh my god, like the pressure is on, this is impossible. But I do for everybody, I did my best to shake down the universe for some answers. And so I started drawing, and this was like a bit of automatic writing, which is where spirit uses you as your hand to write. And I remember writing like England, I remember writing London, and then there was an arrow going north, and it said north of London at the top, and then these names came through: a year, the word house fire, and then father crossed out.
Oh my God.
And uncle was on there as well. And so I was like, no idea what to tell you, but here's your reading. And we tried to pull it apart a little bit in the session, but then she wrote me a while after that, and she said, well, you're not going to believe what happened. She said, I looked north of London, and there was this town, and this town in the year that you wrote down had a house fire, and there was only one in the newspaper. And in that house fire, there were two boys, and they were brothers, and um, one of them, both of them survived the fire. This one's name is my uncle's name, and the reason father is crossed out is he died a year or two ago. But I have reached out to the uncle. We've confirmed genetically that we're related. And so the gentleman whose name that where it said father, where it was crossed out, was my dad. And so it worked. She was able to locate her family using the reading. But also, I was pretty stressed about it, if I'm being totally honest. So that was one. Another one would have been a missing persons case. So I used to do weekly live readings on Monday nights, and kind of remember the message, but I remember bringing through a girl passed away, I think from something shady. She was a missing person, and then this woman's name kept coming through. I would say it was about 30 minutes after I got off the live, I got an email from this woman saying, hey, my cousin died. She matches the description that you gave. She's been missing. Oh, she didn't say died. She said she's been missing for X amount of time. Did you get any other information? And I felt in that moment like pulled, like it was like I didn't have a choice. Like I was involved in this, and I felt so connected at a heart level with this woman and the family. And so I called her. I asked her for her phone number, and I called her. And I remember picking up my pen and paper and immediately started drawing a map. And I was like, this is weird. I don't even know what to do with this. It's just a basic map. But I remember bringing through all this information on the phone, and I took pictures of the paper. Um, and then, to make a long story short, they eventually did find her. They found her around the date that I said that they would. They found her in the location that I said she'd be in. And it was pretty crazy. And it did take a while, because when they went to the location of the first map, they found her sweater hanging on a fence, which I told them would be there, and also pill bottles, which I told them would be there. And but then there was a print of a body on the ground. So what we found out later was that people that had harmed her knew that they were going to search there based on my map, and they moved her. And so it was like this whole process of them moving her body and me redrawing maps and doing readings every couple of days to try and relocate it. And so it was an intense few months, and we worked on it for a few months. And then at the end, I was having trouble like figuring out exactly where she was. But I said, well, an older couple are going to find her body on or around this date, and you're going to have find peace. And I got a call. I think it was like the day after something, the date that I gave them, and they said, "You're not going to believe what happened. Elderly couple were walking on this corner of their property, and they found her." And the reason they couldn't go there themselves was that it was all private property. So they didn't feel right trespassing to do the search themselves. And at this point, the police were just not helping. So that was weird and intense.
The entire time you were talking, I just had chills going in and out of my body. That was so creepy.
Crazy.
Very cool though. Is there anything like, have you ever had any scary interactions, or has anything weird, scary ever happened to you?
Yeah, it sure has. Well, nothing scary. I mean, I think outside looking in, it sounds terrifying. Being there in the moment and seeing it happen was not so scary. I would say it was more like startling. So I used to do paranormal investigations, and I've been a part of several paranormal teams in Canada.
Wow.
Over the years. Yeah, they would call me when they got something really messed up. And I remember going to this one house, and it was in the general Ottawa area. It was actually, well, it was across the river in Quebec. And I remember we walked in, and the way that investigation usually works is the psychics, or they're called sensitives, will walk around the house. They don't talk to each other. They just make notes, and they, to try and keep it objective. And they pass those notes off. And then people use that to set up the cameras or do research on the land or whatever. And so I remember walking in the house, and the family was there, and the mom and dad and the two kids were playing in the living room, and I did my walkthrough and I wrote everything down, went outside with the other sensitives, and the parents came out of, and I said, "Oh, like how old are your kids? They look very similar in age." Um and then the other sensitive said, "Yeah, are they twins?" And then the parents were like, "This happens all the time, but we only have one, but everyone sees two." Which is creepy, right?
That's
Wow.
insane.
And like had I not experienced it, I wouldn't even believe it, to be honest. So then they bring out this picture of this kid, and it's a Christmas Day picture, and he's standing there holding his present, and he's all excited. And right from, he's right in front of a entertainment unit that's glass. And so instead of the back of him being reflected in the glass, it's him facing forward, which also really creepy. So then I thought, all right, well, this is weird, but whatever. So fast forward to later that night, and we're setting up equipment, and I'm upstairs with one of the other team members, and they're setting up a camera and heat sensors and all of that. And all of a sudden, we could smell burning. Like the whole place smelled like it was on fire. One of the team members got launched, is the right word, down the hallway in front of me. So I saw them get thrown down a hallway.
Oh my God.
And so that was scary. Like that was a little sketch, right? And so I would say that was the freakiest investigation I'd ever done. It's not the craziest experience I'd ever had in a reading space, but in terms of a paranormal investigation, that was a weird one. The creepiest thing that I really remember happening in my own space was I was home alone. I was waiting for a client to come. And the way that my office was set up at the time was there was my desk, two chairs in front of it, and my chair. And then the doors to the office are these sort of glass doors, right? So I went upstairs, and, I went in, lit a candle, lit some incense, went upstairs and was just getting ready and combing my hair and things like that. And I could hear this scraping sound, but it was winter time. So I figured it was a snowplow. So I thought nothing of it, came back downstairs, wasn't paying attention, opened the office door, and I couldn't. And I had realized that my desk, the two chairs, and my chair had all been pushed over simultaneously,
No.
about a foot and a half, right? So I was like, well, that's weird. And I was like home alone. It was me and the dog and the cat, and that was it. And I got into my office, I put everything back. And the craziest part about it, which also is the part that makes it make sense, was the woman who was coming. I did her reading, and when it came to question time, she told me that she was there because objects were moving around in her house by themselves. And I'm a very skeptical person, which you probably wouldn't guess because of the work that I do, but I'm very skeptical and I got to see it to believe it.
Mhm.
And had that not just happened, I would have thought she was crazy and I probably would not have been able to help her because I would have been stuck in my own head about it. So that was another one that was definitely a little weird.
Ugh, I
There's
just I can't.
so much. I really wanted to ask you, have you ever had anyone come to you for a reading and just nothing comes through? Does that ever happen?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can't read everybody, right? So I think sometimes either the medium isn't the right medium or the person doesn't actually need the reading or it's not the right time. But yeah, that definitely happens sometimes for sure.
I remember when we went to come see you, you pointed at me and you were like, I have so much to tell you. And then you looked at Amira and you were like, not so much.
Not as much for me.
Not as much for you.
Yeah, and I always think that it's based on like how much it's needed. So if somebody like really needs the help or really needs the information, then it will flow. It flows easily and in detail. And if people just don't and they're, not needing it, then it will be less, if at all, if at all.
I asked you at the time, but I want to ask you here on the pod. Do
Sure.
you ever lie to people for their own good?
No, no, I don't because I always feel like the person is paying me to tell them what I see.
Mhm.
And so whether it's what they want to hear or not, I just will say it anyway. The only thing that I will say is there have been sometimes information will come through where it didn't feel clear. So it felt muddled and it felt scary. And I was like, okay, spirit world, I'm throwing this back to you. You need to give it to me in another way, in a way that will be helpful for the person. And so that's like the only time where I've shifted information, but it was like, more in a way where I'm like, no, this is not a healing, phrase or whatever. So throw it back, give it to me again. And that's pretty much been the only time that I've had to kind of do something where it wasn't just clear exactly as I was receiving it.
Right. I wanted to ask you, do you ever worry about like bad energy kind of lingering around you, like other people's, just with all the interactions that you have and all the readings that you do? I don't know if that's a little too like voodoo-ish of a question, but like, I don't know if you get what I mean.
Oh, I do. And actually, it's a good question. Yes, yes, it is a real thing. And everybody carries, their own energy. And their energy is comprised of all of the things that who they are and all the things that they've lived within their life. And speaking, if you're coming to a psychic or a medium, you're kind of messed up. Like there's a reason for you to be there. Usually the psychiatrist didn't work and now you're here. And so for not for everybody, but for many people. And so that is a heavy thing. And there is a lot of heavy energy around some people that come because they're there to receive healing. And so what we can often feel is their pain that they may step into the room with. And so there's a whole process of how to clear that out, after a session. And I think I know myself and any other psychic or medium that I've ever known has had a way of doing that to kind of cut the cords from the people that they help.
Gotcha.
So just going back to the lady who came to see you with the objects moving, my sister, and again, I think my whole family has abilities. We just haven't really got into them because sometimes I will just see things and then they will happen like the next day or whatever, or just weird stuff will happen to me and I can't explain it. But my sister and her husband, they see moving, they've seen like a bread on their counter fly right off of it. Like, is there any meaning behind why objects fly like that? There are other scenarios too that have happened in their house. I won't get into them, but it all has to do with objects moving on their own.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they have to burn their house down. I mean, just kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, I will say this about any kind of haunting that I've ever investigated. So whether it's like kinetic hauntings like that, whether it's just people feeling weird in their space or hearing things, the one thing that I realized over the years that I was doing that, and it's one thing that kind of ties all this together, is the houses have only ever been as haunted as the people who live there. And
Mm.
I don't mean that people are haunted necessarily, but that they have ability, gifts, and talents that they're not even aware of. And so their energy field was able to allow things to manifest within it. So I have no doubt that when you're family is not in that home, that there's probably not a ton of activity. Their presence is required in order to make it happen. Things can manifest more easily or manipulate matter within their energy field.
I would
Interesting.
immediately be like, universe does not want me to eat this carb.
Toss the bread out.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly, I could listen to you talk. I want to
All
ask
day.
you every question about every session you've ever had, but I wanted to firstly congratulate you on your book, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about it and what inspired it, how long it took you to do it.
Sure, yeah. So I was inspired to well, it's here. It's
Okay,
the little book
great.
of
Can you hold it up a little
wise and
bit?
powerful.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
The little
Little
book
book
of
of
wise
wise.
and powerful thoughts.
I just wanted to write something that could help people. I wanted it to be something where they didn't have to read it cover to cover, and inside, like, it's one basically like a thought per page, right? And so I wanted it to be something quick and easy. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but nobody has an attention span anymore.
Yeah.
It's just and neither do I. And I didn't have the attention span to write it, some big chapter written tome. And so that's why I wrote it, was for that. I wanted to be able to inspire people, to help them, and to help them to figure out, like, how to help themselves, which I think is one of the most important things. And so this book helps people to sort of shift their perspective on things using inspirational quotes and ideas and concepts.
That's amazing.
That's
Congrats on that. I
Thank you.
saw, I think it was on your Facebook. I saw on one of your socials that you, with the book, you had reached like a milestone. Can you elaborate more about that? It was the best selling?
Yeah, it was. So it went up to, within its category. So it was like the new age and self-help categories. It went up into like the top, like the top, like the top 10, and it almost made it into the top 100 on Amazon overall.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, it was kind of crazy. I didn't expect that, if I'm being totally honest. I thought like three people would have a copy, like my dad, my aunt, like my brother, maybe like one random person on the internet. And it completely went the other direction, and people just started buying it like crazy. And I was getting emails and messages on my Facebook page of people saying, "Oh my God, I love this. It's great." And then I found out some readers were using it as a reading tool, like tarot cards, and just like opening a random page for people. So yeah, it definitely went a lot further than I expected it to. And so I'm working on more now.
I was just going to ask because it unleashed, an interest in writing more.
It did. And I had tried for a long time to write a book. And I used to be able to write forever, like diarrhea of the keyboard, right? Just pages and pages and pages. Um, and unfortunately, when you work in social media for a long time, you have to learn to condense huge concepts into like a sentence or two. And I couldn't figure out how to undo that. And then I just decided one day, like, you know what? I'm just going to write a book where it's literally a sentence or two on every page. And I'm going to put as much of my heart and my soul into it as possible and hope that people will like it. And they did. So it worked out.
That's amazing. I appreciate it. Like a quick read, a book that isn't like a 7,000 page novel.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah, I think so. A really awesome author that I had met right after, like, getting this book out there. I was kind of telling her once about, like, that whole process of how I compress something and then couldn't get it to like uncompress it for writing books. And um, she said, why say more, basically, why say more words than what you have to get your point across? And she had quoted another author in this. But after she told me that, and she's like somebody that I've looked up to for a long time. I think she's absolutely amazing. But when she said that, I was like, oh, you know what? I guess it's okay to write this kind of book. So it just kind of, yeah, it was cool.
That's very neat. I've referred a couple of my friends to your classes. Can you tell us more about your classes? I hear they're very cool. I'm actually debating myself if I should get into them. Although I know once you get into, learning, it's hard to really get out of it. And I'm kind of scared. So please tell us more.
Sure, yeah, and you're kind of right about that. Like once you open that door, there's no closing it.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have managed to, but generally, it's like a floodgate. Yeah, so I teach people how to connect to their own abilities because I believe that we're all already receiving messages, information, and communications from the universe. My approach to teaching is to show people in a very hands on way how that's already happening so that they can become aware of it consciously and then do it on purpose. And so, all of the classes that I teach, especially my 6 week program, it's all practice based. It's all me showing exercises, showing how to do things, and then people do readings right in the first class, even if they've never done one before. And watching people freak themselves out is probably my greatest pleasure from all of it. That and sending more people who can help people out into the world. But it's pretty fun.
That's very cool. Can you tell people, we're going to put your social on the screen, but can you tell people where to go to book your readings and, sign up for your classes?
Well, good luck because
Yeah, good luck
it's
getting there.
so booked up. But if they manage to, yeah, where should they go?
Sure. So they can go to my website, matthewstapley.com, and then there's a link on there in the contact us part, which is like an auto scheduler where they can, book a reading if they want to. And the best place to find me is definitely on Facebook. That's where I'm the most active. I'm there every day. I do free readings here and there and message work and honestly just write ridiculous posts half the time. But it is a great community of people. They are my heart, truly. And it's continuously growing, which is awesome.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, and no pressure, because if nothing comes through, we can cut this out. But do you have any feedback for Chris?
Was there anything that just came to your mind like it did when I first came to you?
No,
Anything
but
about
that
his love life?
no, but that doesn't mean I can't look for it. Sure. Let me tune in. I got a pen and paper here.
Oh shit.
I'm specifically going to look at your love life for you. Let's see what messages come through. Oh, well, nothing like getting heavy right out of the gate, Chris. All right. So they're giving you advice. Actually, they're saying that you have to actually let your walls down if you want to find something meaningful. The reason why they're saying this is they're showing me you meeting people, but there's like a glass wall between you and them, and there's what you want them to see as a projection on the glass wall. And so there's advice here to actually let people in a little bit more. I can see that it is going to happen for you, and it feels very soon, like it's showing up in the present near future, which is within several, 6 months or something like that. The advice though is to actually be open. They're saying that you work with overcoming vulnerability. They're saying that it's hard for you to actually be receptive sometimes, and once you can manage that, it's going to get a lot easier for you. So that's what I get on your love life, but it will happen. And if I would put a date on it, I would say by September, around the 7th of September of this year, you will know who that person is, and whoever you are with by that time will be long term.
Wow. You just looked right in his soul, and as his best friend, I could say that was 100% accurate.
Yeah, they're saying that and they're being clear on this too. It's not coming from insecurity, so it's not like trying to hide who you are because you don't think you're lovable. It's just about not. It's about having difficulty with like turning off your how do I say, not turning off your personality, but turning off elements of your personality that are projected, right? So that's what they're saying. They're saying to like just be yourself. I think essentially there's a difficulty with that, and I don't think it's because you're afraid people won't like you. I think it's just your natural discomfort with actually having somebody look at you. So that's what I get.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Matt.
Can I ask, obviously not us, but in your social life, although we just did want a reading, do I just imagine that your friends or people you socialize with ask you to do this for them on a regular basis? Is that annoying? Does that happen?
But do they? Because I remember you also saying that you don't do it for friends.
I don't. Yeah. I'm like, I have people that come into my life and they want to be my friend and they start pulling that crap. And I'm like, nope, sorry. My work and my personal life are two different things.
Book a session.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Totally. So occasionally, like people will try. For me, it's like it feels incredibly disrespectful. I wouldn't go to my friend who's a dentist and say, "Hey, like fix this, fix
True.
this right at 11 o'clock at night." So when people try to do that, I put up a hard boundary immediately, and I say, "Listen, like if you want a reading with me, you can go through the same way that everybody else does, but generally, I don't read for friends or family."
We have a quick 5 questions for you, just a little get to know you. Just answer what,
Sure.
one or the other.
Stay in or go out.
Go out.
Tequila or vodka.
Oh, neither. Is there like a C, like a neither? 'Cause
Sweet or salty.
oh, sweet for sure, hands down.
Vacation or staycation.
Staycation.
Meal prep or wing it.
Do people actually meal prep? Wing it. Wing it.
So
38 years
no
old,
vodka
probably
or
wing it.
tequila. What's your drink of choice?
Water, obviously.
Okay. Your alcoholic beverage of choice.
All right. I actually think beer is probably my favorite. I'm not really that much of a liquor person, but if I'm gonna do liquor, it's gonna be rye for sure, hands down.
And I guess the last question I wanted to ask you is, what do you want people to walk away from today knowing about you? And what do you say to people, or do you even bother to address skeptics?
Awesome. Good question. So, well, I'll answer those in reverse. So, what do I say to skeptics? Honestly, nothing. I don't. As long as they're being respectful to me, my job is to help people to heal. There are a lot of people who don't believe in this work, and there's a lot of people who don't believe in a lot of things. So I just kind of like leave it alone, and I respect their skepticism. I'm naturally a skeptical person myself, so I get it. I don't try to convert skeptics. People try to get me to, but the other side of that is they're skeptical for a reason, and I don't want to disturb somebody's system of belief. So I just sort of leave it alone. Now, if they come to get a reading from me, as long as I don't know they're a skeptic, I just do the reading. When I know they're a skeptic, I get terrified, and it like kind of freezes me up. So yeah, generally I just say, we all have our beliefs like anyone else would. And what was the other question? Sorry.
What do you want people to walk away from today knowing about just this line of work, but also you personally?
The biggest thing I want people to know in general is that they're not alone in whatever it is that they might be going through, whether it's heartache or grief or life transitions or a rough spot or mental health issues. They are not alone. Like everybody's surrounded by an immense amount of family and loved ones, and even our fur babies on the other side. And I really, really believe that. And that's the biggest thing I want people to know in general is they're never alone. The second thing is that the universe accepts them exactly as they are, right? And we always have this idea that I won't be able to attain X, Y, and Z until I become this person or this version of myself. And I want people to know that the universe loves who they are now. And that their loved ones in heaven love who they are now. And maybe we can get out of our own way sometimes and understand that we are good enough as we are. So that's the other thing. And about me, honestly, I don't really care if people remember anything about me other than that. I'm here to help, I guess.
You're very humble, but you're very sought after. People love you.
Well, I love people, so it kind of works out. And honestly, like I just have a lot of fun with it. I have fun reading for people. I have a lot of fun on Facebook and social media. To me, it's like walking into a party every morning and like leaving the party at like midnight or 1 in the morning. And I think for me, it's just a lot of fun, right? And getting to connect with people and share with people and hear their experiences, because I think that's one of my favorite things in all of this as well is people open up and they talk about the things that they've gone through or the paranormal experiences that they might have had. And that's something that's also very close to my heart.
Well, congratulations on the book. And we're so excited to have you on the pod. Thank you so much for taking the time. We could go on and on, but we won't hold you forever. But we really hope we could have you back.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you guys. It would be my pleasure anytime. Thank you.